AVC has identified 3 fundamental problems that have to be tackled immediately. 1, insecurity. 2, the destruction of the economy. 3, bribery and corruption. Previous speakers have commented on this separately, but I would like to draw your attention that whatever we are going to do, we have to secure Nigeria first.
Well, that was Buhari promising to fix Nigeria's many problems during election campaign in Lagos in 2015.
Well, you fast forward now, 3 years later. Have those promises been fulfilled? That's the question on the lips of so many. Who's best to answer the question?
Other than our guest, of course. Well, now let's start this way. Here is how President scored himself on security while addressing the nation on Democracy Day.
Before this administration came into being 3 years ago, Boko Haram held large areas of land spanning several local governments in the northeast. Today, the capacity of the insurgents has been degraded, leading to the re-establishment of authority of government and the release of captives, including happily 106 Chibok and 104 deputy girls, and over 16,000 other persons held by Boko Haram.
Well, an herdsman attack across Nigeria, especially in the Middle Belt region. President Buhari assured Nigerians that the menace is being addressed and that identified culprits and their sponsors will certainly be made to face the full wrath of the law.
Herdsmen and farmers clashes in several communities, which have led to high number of fatalities and loss of properties across the country, is being addressed, and the identified culprits and their sponsors shall be made to face the full wrath of the law.
All right, you heard Mr. President there, but with us in the studio is a security consultant, Colonel Hassan Stan Labo, retired. Good morning and thanks for joining us on the show.
Ngozi. Morning.
Okay, doing an assessment of the Buhari performance in the last 3 years as far as security is concerned. Let me just bring out Thomas Hobbes' quote there, which is
The English philosopher.
Absolutely. Let me sound like you this morning, the philosopher. Without government, man's life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And that the job of every government really is, the major thing that every government is to do is to ensure security for its citizens, wherever they are. How has this administration done in that regard?
Let me also go Shakespearean.
Yes, please.
Fair is foul. Fair is foul.
Is a
and
morning
foul
of
is
quotes.
fair.
No, let's hear that again.
Fair is foul and foul is fair. That is to say, well, whatever has taken place within the security sector, so to speak, fine. Government has tried its best within given existing resources and circumstances, but one fact remains. As citizens, our expectations are yet to be fully met. 2, we could still do, or they could still do more. And I think as citizens, it behoves on us to see how much support we can lend to enable them achieve the needful, be it the military component, be it those, the executive or those in government, so to speak. You know, it's been quite a tedious journey in the last 3 years. We thank God so far, the situation in the Northeast, we would say, has abated to an extent, given the reinsurgence we witness of late again.
Yeah.
Yes. so we cannot really speak too comfortably about it.
All right.
All right. We are aware that we cannot really attain a zero-level threat situation because we are also dealing with terrorism. Okay? But we expect that enough punch should be given the belligerents to such a point that we can at least sleep with our two eyes closed.
All right, Colonel, just before I ask my question, because let me just add that Thomas Hobbes was what you call a social contract philosopher.
There you
Yes.
go.
Right,
Yes.
Doctor, is there a way we can say that the other menace, the herdsmen in a menace, added some sort of dent on the achievements of the government in terms of security?
Yes, I would agree with you. I would agree with you. And that's why, to be fair to government at times, when I want to score the government on security, I try to, separate the Northeast situation from the rest, kidnapping, herdsmen,
Banditry
and so on.
and what
Because
have you.
when I bring both together, they are going to score very low.
Ah.
I must be very frank. When you separate them, you give kudos to government as far as the Northeast is concerned. Because our men have performed fantastically well.
Yes.
Now, the other challenges we are facing, kidnapping, herdsmen especially, and so on. Not until of late, when we started seeing some level of proactiveness in the North Central, and I mean Benue, Taraba, and so on, from our security agencies, okay, which was now beginning to really yield some result. We are beginning to see arrests, we are beginning to see all sorts of, getting all sorts of information from, or revelations from those who were being arrested,
Yeah, but
which
those
was
arrests,
becoming
people would say
eye-openers.
those arrests, a lot of people are saying it's just playing to the gallery because there's been mounting pressure on the military and the government especially to actually do something and demonstrate that really they're on top of this situation. That strong punch that you talked about in dealing with the belligerents, that seems to be lacking.
That is what I am saying of late now we are
yes.
witnessing in the North Central.
Yes.
And if you are saying that people are beginning to say that is sheer allegations, the point is that of recent, within the last few weeks or a month, in the North Central, we are beginning to see what we expect. And what is it we expect? Carry the battle to these guys. Be proactive, don't be responsive. Don't wait until they hit somebody in Kagoro or in Kafanchan or in somewhere in Benue. Sort them out, know their hideouts and move. Using our air power, using our land forces. They must know we are after them. We are not waiting for them to come. So we become the troubleshooters to them.
All right, Colonel, we heard the president a few moments ago say that all those responsible are going to be brought to justice, and even their sponsors
Yes.
are also going to be brought to
Yes,
justice.
because the revelations are revealing all that.
Yesterday on the show, I made reference to two epistemological concepts. That's a theory of knowledge, the concept of rationalism and empiricism. Rationalism is saying that a certainty of knowledge is guaranteed through reason, through the mind, while empiricism is saying that a certainty of knowledge is guaranteed through sense experience. That is, I see, I feel, and then I believe. I belong to that class.
Okay.
Are we seeing that effort on the parts of government to ensure that those responsible for what we are seeing, the sponsors especially, are brought to justice?
Well, if I understand you, I want to believe that you are asking whether we think the government might have or could have the willpower
yes.
to go about it.
Absolutely.
Not just the willpower now, but actually knowing who the sponsors are. Because if you know who they are, then you know how to get them or where to get them.
I think we're beginning to know them already.
You
Because
think
as
so?
far as I'm concerned, from the revelations coming out, some of the individuals in authorities are also complicit. Okay? I mean, we'll be reading all the reports coming out.
Would that include the military hierarchy also, the soldiers, actually the soldiers on the battle front who have been fingered in colluding with the bandits and the criminals, especially in places like Taraba?
In the words of Theophilus Danjuma.
Absolutely.
Well, it wasn't here that I spoke about Theophilus Danjuma. I reacted to Jonah Danjuma's vituperations,
Yeah,
I think the next day when he spoke. And I was saying that, well, As far as I'm concerned, what he's saying is informed by the level of pressure on him. One. Two, whatever the situation, I expect that as a statesman and given his stature, Danjuma or Danjuma's voice is a voice that cannot be ignored. We should bear that in mind, whatever our perception of who he is. Fine. In that same stead, I expect that statesmen of that level should always make sure their pronouncements, to a greater extent, help in bringing us together than separating us. Now let's look at the facts inherent in the statements he made. Yes. If there is a non-action on ground somewhere emanating, I'm looking at the security agencies now, emanating from a particular security agent that has been deployed somewhere, we should look at who is in charge there on the ground and be able to pick him and get him responsible, rather than generalizing. Anyway, the army is taking sides.
Anyway, the army came out
to
the
armed forces is taking sides.
That position.
I don't see how a Buratai sitting in Abuja will be taking sides with such a thing. Instead, we should be asking General Buratai, who is the local commander on ground there? Why did this not happen? Why was there no sense of proactiveness in so? We should be able to, interrogate such things.
But where should the buck stop in situations like that? Shouldn't it be with the service chiefs, including Buratai, for example?
Of course. And
elsewhere, you would expect that heads would roll. Of course, the Senate, the National Assembly, and many Nigerians actually have been saying there's a need to actually rejig the security apparatus.
If our feeling is that, look, maybe there is some engine fatigue, we are beginning to experience deficits in terms of innovation and so on, and so there is a need to change the guard, fine, no problem. One should not be adamant about that before it begins to look as if there is something you are also trying to protect. If it's a general feeling that, look, they've done their best. But what I kick against is the way in which the Senate was presenting it. I reacted to that too. I watched a senator shouting, sack the service chiefs, sack them, sack them. We are not talking to small boys. These are generals. And besides, these are people who actually have proven their mettle and have been able to sacrifice for us in the Northeast. If you think, fine, we are no longer getting the best from them, and we need fresh hands and brains to come on board with fresh ideas, for heaven's sake, say it in a manner in which the fellow whom you are saying should be removed should feel that the nation is grateful for my service.
And appreciative.
And appreciative.
Yeah.
Because if you are saying sack, how many sleeping senators in the House are we going to sack?
All right, of course, that is just one aspect of the...
How many?
All right, Colonel, if you look at, just as you mentioned earlier, and quite frankly, that's admissible, that the Nigerian military, the army have done, they have done very well in terms of curbing the menace of Boko Haram. They have been heavily degraded. The attacks have reduced, quite frankly. We must admit that. But the rearing of the headsmen issue, is there a sense in which you would think that the way that the government has handled the problem has exacerbated it? Is there a way that you think, because people have said the government has handled the issue with kid gloves, and that perhaps has exacerbated, given them courage to continue? Just a few days ago, we had the attack on the seminary where a priest was was shot almost killed, and all of that, and so on and so forth. So is there a sense you think that the government has been very slow to handle the problem?
You are very correct. In fact, it resonates with me. Okay, government has not really reacted, especially at the initial time, in the manner in which we expected to react over this issue. And that was why some of us were saying, look, Boko Haram eventually turned out to be the what's it called now, of the government that has just left. All right, we all hope that
it was the Achilles heel of
yes, we all hope the headsmen will not also, the headsmen issue
turn out to be the undoing.
Will not also turn out to be the undoing of this administration. Because the sort of lackadaisical attitude that was visited to Boko Haram at the initial stage It's what we started witnessing over the herdsmen issue, and it was garnering all sorts of strength and so on. And since one thing we should bear in mind is that the herdsmen issue has a wider spread than Boko Haram. We've been able to contain Boko Haram to the northeast. The herdsmen issue is spreading all over, not central, in Delta, here, there, and so on. So we have to be very, very careful.
So how should government now respond to this herdsmen crisis? Beyond people saying, government just has not been able to call a spade a spade. They've only called it a farming implement instead of what it is.
No,
why have you not been able to call them what they are, a terrorist organization?
Ngozi, I think Mr. President is now addressing the issue the way it should be addressed. And I would want to expatiate on that. One, we are beginning to see the role the military is playing over the herdsmen issue and the results we are beginning to get. We expect more of that, all right? Two, I expect other steps outside combat to be taken. And what are these steps? One, we must all, both at the state and federal level, be ready to embrace ranching. Enough of this primitive method of rearing the herds. Okay? In doing that, and to hasten the process, because we are in a haste to address the situation, government can make available some level of credit funding to both the host communities where we have these issues and the herdsmen. That credit funding can be accessed by the host community in enabling them get farms and grow the fodder which the herds would feed on while in the ranches.
But that is assuming that this truly is a herdsman farmers crisis and not something else, because people have been giving it other names, including ethnic cleansing and what have you.
I agree
so
with you.
So how do you...
I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you. It's becoming a mixed grill of, yeah, but we now have to start picking them one by one and providing solutions to them.
Okay.
Okay? For the herdsmen thing, the time has come for us to embrace ranching, like we said. Good. Two, provision of credit funding for also the herdsmen to be able to get land in the various places where they are and be able to immediately put their ranch in place.
Yeah.
It is not free money. Credit funding. It's only that to be some form of soft loan which they can afford with some level of long-term period to pay.
Yes.
Good. Haven't taken care of that. Two, I expect that serious enlightenment campaign should now be embarked upon using government's propaganda machinery like the NOA, which has been sleeping. That's one organization that's been sleeping. Using, if we don't have the right man there, let's get the right man to do the job.
Absolutely.
Yes, using NOA. NOA should not just come and start speaking some big grammar on television. Your target audience are these Fulani local men.
The language they understand.
Good. Take adverts on BBC Hausa service, which they always tune to. They carry radios.
Oh yeah, they are transistor radios and what have you.
All the northern states have Hausa services. Send your jingles there. Have time to talk with these guys. So at all time, these things are being explained to them in their own local tongue. We must penetrate this problem. Not come and start talking to me, speaking big grammar. I am not the man who is the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is there. The man carrying his stick and telling you he does not see why he has to be restricted to one spot. You explain it to him. You get people who they respect, like the Sultan and so on, to put his voice into such things and speak to them, quoting even verses in the Quran that tells you you must live in peace with your neighbors, you must obey constituted authorities. This is the way you penetrate the hearts of these people. Okay? Good.
That is in the case of herdsmen farmers clashes.
Yes.
With the proliferation of arms.
Good.
And light weapons and what have you in Nigeria and the porous borders.
Yes.
And all of that.
And
then on the other hand,
yes,
you have this general perception that what we are facing is external aggression or fallout of the Libya crisis. and all of that. How do you meet those
Thank you.
challenges?
Thank you. The bulk of the herdsmen we see carrying weapons around, the bulk, I said, are mostly from our northern neighbors, Niger, Chad, and so on. If you understand that most of these states surrounding us are more or less failed states, some of these states have been in all sorts of
Internal crisis.
internal crisis. There are all sorts of rebels and factions carrying weapons up and down. In fact, in the case of Chad, when Hussein Habre's men were on the negotiating table that brought some level of peace today to Chad, at the end of it, part of the negotiations, part of the terms that were reached was that the men were going to go home with their arms, because they insisted that if the government fails to do what they were going to do,
They will go
they
back
were
to the
returning.
trenches.
So they are not going to return and start looking for arms. They are already with their arms. Now, most of them are headsmen. So they go about with their arms. Now, given the desertification problems we have, which has driven most of these headsmen southwards, I hope you know it's not only Nigeria that is suffering this problem.
No, it's not.
Ghana, Togo, and
Yes.
so on.
Yes.
So that our house is a bit compounded. Good. Now they started coming into our territories with these arms, meeting a government that is wondering, why are these guys armed?
Yeah.
And they are wondering, what is wrong with these ones? Where we are coming from, we carry arms. You mean you don't carry arms here? So the question is, how safe are your borders?
That's the point.
How come these men were able to cross your border
penetrate.
with arms? That is an infringement on your territorial integrity. That is an affront to your nation. Now, where is your intelligence community that they could not detect this and immediately send the warning for something to be done? Two, where have we left diplomacy in addressing this issue? How come for all this work, it didn't just start today. It didn't just start today.
Yes.
Good. For all these few years, 3, 4, 5 years, how come our government have not been able to engage some of these neighboring states?
Initially, on
By
the
way
part
of
of Buhari,
diplomacy.
you heard about this engagement between President Buhari and the Chadian president, the presidents of Niger, and other countries, including Cameroon. And you wonder what has come of
Good.
those.
Good. What have we made
engagements.
out of all these diplomatic moves? Thirdly, the time has come for Nigeria to revisit the ECOWAS Protocol on Free Movement and Trade and see how it impacts
On
on our
Nigeria.
national security. We cannot just sit and continue to watch.
All right,
Enough
Cornel.
is enough.
All right, Cornel.
Nigeria's economy is about 65% of the
Right.
entire economy
Yeah.
of the West African. So we are such a big, large economy.
All right, Cornel, quite a number of very good points made. The National Assembly asked the security chiefs to go back, sit down, and then come up with a request for additional funds to help them in this fight against insurgency. How do you look at that?
Is it more funds they need, or more manpower?
No, not more.
Or
Not
better
manpower.
morale? What exactly is the missing link?
Because it's correct. It encompasses everything. You see, defense funding, I would want to categorize into 4 major areas. Equipment procurement, training,
Like the Tucano aircraft.
thank you,
and
thank
so
you, and several others, all the platforms. Training, operations, and then welfare. That is where motivation comes in and so on. All right? Manpower, every other issue falls within these 4 categories, if you look at them, and so on. Under operations, you talk of your communication equipment, intelligence,
Yeah.
and so on. All these are huge areas of financial,
Engagement.
requirements. Yes. My brother, it is important we understand this. Defense is one area where you can never spend enough. That is the truth. More so when you run the type of defense sector we run, that is completely import dependent. Every little pin
Is
in the
import,
defense sector,
yeah.
you import it. More so to be further bedevil our situation, most of the equipment you import are made by businessmen who after 5-10 years will stop producing the parts because they are not there to keep you going. They are running business.
So they eventually become obsolete.
Thank you. We are buying Tucano aircraft today.
All right.
In another 10-15 years.
It may be phased down.
All right.
That's a real problem. So the brains that built the Wunigwes of this world need to be revived, more or less. So
and the military should also be looking inward to see how they can generate income.
All right.
Okay.
Always very explosive to have you on the show. Colonel Hassan Stanlabo, security expert. Well, thank you very much indeed for coming to express your thoughts with us.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.